Well, first of all, I'm a child of the '60s, so unsettling times is it's nothing that is unheard of. More, more of our foundations seem to be shaking in the 1960s than at any time since. From that time to this, that's been the most. So, what came out of that? What came out of the 1960s was one of the greatest revivals the world's ever seen, which was, at least in America, millions of people flooded into the gospel. But there was a kind of an agreed upon milieu that made the gospel have fruitful ground. We don't really have that nowadays. We're in a time where all the foundations are shaking. And when I say that, let's talk as Christians. What do we cherish the most? Is we cherish identity. Who are we? And I was telling my church this weekend that we now suddenly have parents who, will say, well, I'm going to let my children decide on their faith. Well, so you've lived a whole lifetime and you don't have a faith that's worth passing on to your children? All of your experience, all of your learning, all of your knowledge doesn't lead you to say, here is the way, walk in it? And that was a pretty extreme thing in my mind. But now we have a time that has come where suddenly, and I told my wife this 3 years ago, we're reaching a time when you won't be able to determine somebody's gender ahead of time. This is a huge deal. This is probably the most ground-shattering shift in categories. I can't think of anything greater. When we suddenly come to a time that people think that it is incumbent upon them to allow their children to decide their category of their gender, then what we're saying is that we're people with no foundations, people with no direction, people with no understanding, people with no insight. So let me talk about this a little plainer. Categories are the organizing structure. They're like the cells of the body. Agreed upon categories are necessary for there to be order in culture. And when enough of your organizing categories are challenged, what you inject into the culture is chaos. When you inject chaos into a system that's been stabilized, what do? You destabilize the system. What does that do? That causes people to run finding certainty, and it usually causes people to react in fear and in anger, and that usually portends violence. So if I was to tell the truth about what I'm concerned about the most, is I'm concerned about a level of violence breaking out within the culture that we will not be able to manage. And am I prophesying that? No, I'm not saying that by the Spirit or by the Lord, but I am saying this. People need order. And without order, chaos will get very ugly very fast.